There we go. Okay. So thank you for joining us. I'm the Chief Program Officer, as I said, at Board Strong. We're an affiliate of the New York Council of Nonprofits. And our mission is to advance the nonprofit sector and the impact of the work nonprofits do by supporting the achievement of the highest standards of board leadership. Basically, we're your one-stop shop for everything having to do with your nonprofit board governance. We have a board recruiting platform that we'll be talking about in a moment that helps organizations recruit board members and helps people who want to be on boards join boards. This program is being sponsored by the generosity of the Dyson Foundation, Community Foundations of the Hudson Valley, Community Foundation of Orange and Sullivan County, and by our own Regional Advisory Council. So what are we going to be talking about today? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about starting the conversation around diversity. I'm going to show you how to use our board matching platform so that you can start thinking about diversifying your board. Then Michael Sag of WP Theater and I are going to have a conversation about how he has used the platform and also just generally how he has recruited new board members and added diversity over the last year or so, year or two. Then Michael is going to have to leave us and we're going to sort of get back into the details of how you can think about recruiting new board members, the board development cycle, how you prepare for recruitment, how you assess and align your expectations, et cetera. And we'll give you some tips for finding new board members. So let's just start with getting the conversation started between you and your board or your other constituents and remind ourselves what we are talking about here. So these are the demographics from BoardSource. They do something called a survey called Leading with Intent every 2 years. And you'll see that nationwide, our boards and nonprofits generally are not particularly diverse. We've got 78% of board members are white. Very few of them are under the age of 35 or even under the age of 40. Disabilities are not widely represented, and a lot of organizations like museums, theaters, et cetera, don't have the perspective of someone who has accessibility issues on their board. So that's what we want. These are really kind of startling statistics in some ways, and these are the issues that we want to address. Oops, sorry. Okay, so just for a second, talking about, for those of you who are just at the beginning, who haven't really started talking about diversity, or maybe have a little bit, or maybe are a little nervous about talking with your boards or your fellow board members about the need to diversify your organization, right? I think, well, the way we see it is, look, there's ample research that diversity in organizations translates into higher performance, right? Being around people who are different from us makes us smarter, more creative, diligent, hardworking, right? If you want to build teams that are capable of being creative, of making your organization better, of bringing in different perspectives, and you need diversity, and it encourages just novel information and different perspectives. When your board is homogeneous, it can be difficult for people to see things, differently, basically. So that's why we want to encourage diversity on our boards. We also want to make sure that we have representation from the various constituencies that we serve, that we're taking into account the lived experience and the skill sets of the issues that we're trying to address, right? So think about, like, why should your organization think about diversity, right? Is its homogeneous composition limiting your creativity? Do people from your community have a voice at the table? Do you have no subject area experts, right? If you're a school, do you have someone who's interested in education or knows about education, right? Does your lack of diversity limit your access to resources in the community, right? And then, as we also know, when we talk about our boards, about diversity, our funders are asking us to show them that we're working on these issues and that we view them as important. So when you want to start talking to your board about diversity, you need to make sure that they understand that it's an intentional process, that it's something that you have to take thoughtfully and planfully. You can't just, or you could just go out, check a box, recruit people randomly, but that will not be as impactful, right? It's a journey. So whether you're starting your journey at a place where your board members don't understand why they need to be diverse or need to be convinced, that can be a place that you're at. It can take a while. It can take as much as a couple of years as you talk about these things, maybe bring in a facilitator, someone to help you talk about them. Don't expect this to happen overnight. So when you intentionally get started on this process, what you want is a diversity policy, right? And you'll get these slides tomorrow. This is sort of a typical one, right? We believe that we need to be responsive to the needs of everyone in the community who may receive our services, regardless of their racial, ethnic background. We will create and implement programs using our awareness of cultural differences and treat all of our clients with respect. Once you embark on this process, you have to mean it, or at least the majority of your organization and your board needs to really be bought into it. Otherwise, you won't have the impact that you want to have by trying to diversify your organization. So I'm just going to start out by showing you our program for finding board members. This is the Board Strong matching platform. It's free for you to sign up. And this is just our homepage. You go up to, you click here, you can find, register. It will bring you to a profile page for you to fill out about your organization and ask you to think about, what are you looking for? What skills are you looking for? What experiences are you looking for? Why does your board want new board members? Then you can search for board candidates. And we ask our candidates all sorts of information that will help you identify the kinds of diversity that you may be looking for. And we'll talk later about how the process of identifying that. But as you will see there on the right, we ask people what their experiences are, what their skill sets are, what their interests are. And we also ask them all sorts of identifying information about race, ethnicity, accessibility, also things like what time of day they're available. They're all things that can help you think through and find new people who might be outside of your own circle. So right now we're going to start off with a conversation with Michael Sag. Michael Sag is the managing director of the WP Theater Company. WP used to be the Women's Project, and its mission is the future is female, right? It is the oldest and largest theater company dedicated to developing, producing, and promoting the work of women at every stage of their careers. And they have done a lot of thinking about diversity. I pulled part of their diversity statement right off their website. It's their front and center. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but really you can tell that they have thought a lot about what they want to do, how they want to diversify, and their commitment to it. So reckoning with the way that this institution has failed to support BIPOC women and artists and perpetuated supremacist structures. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael a little bit. Hi, Michael, how are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. This is going to be great. So how many board members have you recruited in the last year or two?
In the last 2 years, we've recruited, I think, 7 new board members. 2 through Board Strong, a few artist board seats, which we'll talk about in a second, and then sort of a natural progression of new board members coming in on a fairly regular basis. We started this process really in September of last year. And what we did is we created something called a gap analysis for the institution. And the gap analysis, if you haven't seen or heard of one before, is a document that sort of analyzes all the elements of board and board participation and puts them together in a way, in a glorious visual way that says, these are where your board members are focused. And we addressed age and gender and race, and we tried to address income levels and a variety of other factors, excuse me, including where our board members had expertise. And so to start, we sent out a survey to our board members and had them self-identify in many of these categories. And then we put the data together and shared it with them and said, look, we have many lawyers, but we have no real estate people. We should look for a real estate person. And we identified that the average age of our board of directors was in the mid-60s. And so we began a process of really drilling down into how to diversify age of the board of directors. And interestingly, the conversation around diversity by age led us to identify the give-get for the institution as a barrier to younger individuals, earlier career individuals being able to join. So we created a junior board, which has half of the donation requirement as a full board member, and yet has full board membership privileges. They are contributors, they sit on committees, in some instances they lead committees, and they have full voting rights at our board meetings. And that was an easy group to fill. And what we did was we identified 10% of our board seats, which our bylaws allow us 30 board members. So we said, let's make 3 of them part of the junior board, and we'll evaluate how well or not well this is progressing on a yearly basis. And all 3 of the seats were filled after about the first year and a half. And all 3 of those junior board members have remained with us during the course of that period of time. Our junior board was defined as anybody who's age 35 or less, and they age out. And at 35, they have an option to either join the full board, assuming a full board seat is available, or to resign from the board with our gratitude and thanks. It's a built-in exit based on age. And again, we knew that the racial diversity of our board was lacking at the time. 1/16 of our board identified as non-white. And so we also began a conversation about what can we do to diversify the board. And interestingly, we consulted with some of our friends, our BIPOC friends, and we said, what would make this interesting for you to join? And across the board, the message back was, it's all white people. Why would I want to join a board that's all white people? And we said, well, how do we start? How do we get this? How do we begin this process? If everybody that we would like to have on our board says your board makeup does not feel inviting to me. And so our artistic director said, I would like to form an artist board. I would like to identify another 10% of our seats and call it the artist board, where there is 0 give-get requirement. And yet they also have full voting privileges and a continued tenure on the board should they choose to keep up with us. And we immediately filled 2 of those board seats with BIPOC artists. And now we are in the process of adding a 3rd and 4th BIPOC board member at our September meeting. And I think part of the reason that they felt a resonance and an invitation into this organization is because we could say, we are actively diversifying, and here is an example of us doing that thing that we said. As Barbara said to me a little while ago, when you attempt to add new board members in an effort to check a diversity box, it invariably backfires. And when you don't spend the time and energy engaging with those board members and seeing where their priorities align, which may not be where your priorities align and may not be where the rest of the boards align, if you don't engage in that process, you're doing a disservice to them, and you're also disservicing the institution. We are about to start the process of working on a strategic plan for the institution, and one of the sentiments that our outside support asked us to engage with was really to not choose the people for the strategic planning committee that reflect back our own priorities. Actually choose people who are outside of our comfort circle and welcome them in and listen to the messages. And I would say the same thing about board diversity. If you haven't created an environment which feels welcoming, and you aren't actually going to those people and saying, I don't want you just to show up at a board meeting and check a box. I want you to actually feel free to reach out to me at any time and talk to me, and I will reach out to you and talk about issues both about diversity and not about diversity. We want you to be a full-fledged participant in this process, not, as we said, a box checking for the institution. Barbara?
That's pretty fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So did you get do you feel like you had your entire board with you at the beginning of this process? Did you have to bring some of them along? Are there still some skeptics?
I think we did not have our full board aligned. I will say that about 3 years ago, I've now been at this company for 6 years, and about 3 years ago, we sent the message to the board and said, we are not diverse enough. Please bring and cultivate diverse board candidates. And we, at the time, before we did our gap analysis, we'd say things like, we could use some younger folks. We could use some non-white identifying folks. We could use some non-cisgendered folks. We want all of these, excuse me, we want all of these people to be joining us in the process. And over the course of 2 years, we got exactly 0 candidates from the board side that fit any of these descriptions, which is the reason that we said, well, we're going to make this gap analysis so there's actually a physical thing that we can hand them and say, we've been saying this to you for a while now. Here is the evidence of where we're short. And we're asking you again to please help us do this. And now we've had, I would say, 3 board members exert some effort in helping us diversify the group. It is a really, really complicated question. And several of our board members reached out to us and said, we don't know how to begin this conversation. I don't know how to go up to someone who's transgendered and in my network and say, I'd really like you to join this board because you're transgender. And we debated for quite a bit, really, whether or not that was an appropriate message, or really the message was, you bring something to this board that is separately of value from how you identify. And we want you on this board because of that. And the fact that you identify differently is an added bonus for us. And I think to this day, if I'm being honest, I think many of our board members feel a real reluctance to go out of their network and cultivate until the board has sort of naturally diversified itself. I say naturally, but there is nothing natural about it. It is forced every meeting. We talk about it at every board meeting we have. We celebrate our small victories and lean into the board again to say, you can please bring one candidate that will help us diversify the board. Even if it doesn't work out, the fact that we're attempting to cultivate a diverse board is meaningful for us. But I would say primarily it's the staff making the statements to the board, this needs to change. Although Lisa and I, my co-leader here, we both serve ex officio on the board of directors. And so our voice kind of has the staff and the board component to it. Really, it's us pushing this agenda forward, not the board pushing us anywhere.
That makes sense. I mean, I think it's very common for white people, frankly, to be uncomfortable talking with and about these issues. But the people that we're talking to think about them quite often, and they know that they represent the diversity they want, that we might want. They are less uncomfortable, I think. And many of them, you know, want their voices to be heard in these spaces that they've never been heard before. They're eager to participate. Not everybody feels that way, obviously. So like you said, it's a making sure that their voice is equal and that they're wanted for something in addition or besides that. That's just a nice, you know, like you said, someone in real estate, and if they happen to be a person of color, which you don't have anybody on your board, then all the better, really. You want to focus on that. We have a question in the chat. Someone said, did you start out with people in your circle? Oh, wait. Right. And he also, wait, I'm sorry. Okay, so it sounds like you started out with people who were in your circle, and that's how you sort of got the ball rolling. And now you're going outside of your just immediate circle. Is that a fair comment?
It's a fair comment. The two artist board members that joined immediately, one was a playwright, Danetta Lavinia Grays, who we had worked with and was a lab participant. Our lab program is a 2-year training residency. She had been in the lab and then had one of the shows she wrote performed on Broadway, and she was excited to join the board. And the second was Tamala Woodard, who was our associate artistic director before she left to be the artistic director of another institution. And when she departed us, we said, would you please consider joining our board in this capacity? And we were pretty explicit with the two of them. We said, we've created this artist board to help us diversify, and we're only putting artists on the board who are part of the WP family and can help us take the next few steps forward. And they both generously agreed to join. I think it is really, yes, begun internally. We do have our staff is about 50% non-white, and I think all gender conforming, but definitely all over the map sexuality wise. And then, you know, that's sort of when it became apparent that there was one of these components that was out of place. Our staff was diverse. Our productions, the plays that we produce were very diverse. The members of the lab cohort have been extremely diverse over each of the years that we've done that program. And the board was 90-something% white and old. And so we identified that as a place that we really needed to make substantial change.
That makes sense. I know you have to leave us in a couple of moments, so I'm going to ask you, you used BoardStrong, our platform, to recruit a couple of board members. You want to say, and actually, just so everybody knows, we developed this platform last year. Michael was a very early user and was really helpful when we were kind of in the formative stages in helping us think through sort of what we could do better, or what the platform could do better in service of him finding more board members. So that was great. But you want to tell us a little bit about your experience and whether you would recommend it to others?
Well, I will start off by saying I would 100% recommend it to anyone. It is user-friendly. The content that is gathered by BoardStrong when putting someone into the system allows us to really understand who they are and where their priorities are. There's interest tabs and expertise tabs that share with you what they think they can add and what they are looking to support. And then there's a plethora of content around each of the members in addition to those things. And so I actually can't recommend it enough. And I believe that the folks that have self-selected to be within the network are actually looking for opportunities for board service. Not everybody is a perfect match. We have spoken with a few people that we've been like, I don't think this board service for WP is the right thing for you, and they have agreed. But for the most part, I would even say entirely, it's been a terrific experience, and I continue to use the platform every quarter or so, go back through and comb the new submissions to see if there's anybody that, you know, performing arts / theater is an interest that they can select. And that means I can search for that interest in the system, find the 20 new people that have selected that as an interest of theirs, review their expertise to see if it fits in our gap analysis to cover any of the positions that we're looking for, and then reach out to those people individually. And the benefit is you're not reaching out blind. What I actually get to message them is, this is who I am. I work at a performing arts theater institution, and it's interesting to connect with you because you've identified the following few things, and that connects with me. And in most of the opportunities that I've reached out and said, I'm interested in making a connection, I get some sort of response. Our give get is a little high. So some of them have said, your donation requirement is a little high for me. Others have said, not this time, I just joined another board. But for the most part, these are pleasant interactions. And I'd say with any service such as this, finding 2 board members within any given year or any given set of years feels very, very successful. It's an additional opportunity for us to find board members that fit our needs, separate from just hammering at my existing board of directors. Please give us ideas, please bring ideas to the table. And it's been very successful for us. Again, I highly recommend.
Thank you. That's fantastic. And I think one of the things that you just mentioned that I would drive home with anybody using the platform is you have to be proactive, and it's a bit of a numbers game. Not everybody that you reach out to is going to want to join your board, so you have to, it's like dating. You have to kiss some frogs before you find your prince.
And not count on it working out. I mean, we sometimes say to each other, 10% of board candidates will actually become board members. And that feels like sometimes a pretty good ratio. Like, you have to keep asking and keep being out in the world and keep engaging for you to find success.
That's awesome. Thank
Barbara,
you
I
so
saw
much.
one more question from Jessica that I'm happy to answer.
Okay, if you can stay with us,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
You mentioned 3 boards, art, junior, and regular board, all have voting privileges, correct? How many board members do we have total? Our bylaws allow us to have 30. Currently, we have 17. So of that 17, currently 5 are either junior or artist board. How often do they meet? We have board meetings quarterly. Every year, 4 board meetings, and everybody is required to be on at least 1 committee, and each of the committees meets in preparation of the board meeting also quarterly. And some separate small committees, like our strategic planning committee, we are selecting in who we hope will join us in this process. When we created a short-term buildings committee to help consult on a lease extension, we again selected a few board members and said, would you join us in this process? Do they all meet together or separately? The board meetings are all together, although, given the pandemic, we've adopted a dual remote and in-person board meeting structure. We have a robust AV setup in what is our rehearsal room, which I'm right next to, that we tee up and invite board members to join us in person, but the majority still prefer to join us remotely. How do they coordinate and communicate? Amongst themselves, gloriously. The chair of each committee calls their committee members together. I'm generally involved in making arrangements when it's a committee meeting, but everything that happens outside of a official meeting is coordinated by the chairs. Abby asked, are the art and junior boards separate or seats on the board? They are seats on the board. They are a 10% divestment of the total board seats for that specific purpose, but they are full board members. They reduce down our capacity. When you connect with someone on the platform, do you have folks participate in non-board capacity? Ideally, yes. When one of the board candidates on Board Strong responded to me and said, I'd be delighted to learn more. And it is a long process, cultivating potential board members. Anticipate that sometimes it can take several years. The board member that we're putting on the board at our September meeting, began speaking to us last September. She was at an event, a VIP event for us, brought by another board member in August of 2021. And then she joined us for a holiday party. She joined us for another VIP event. She bought a ticket to our gala. And then the board member that brought her initially reached out and said, it's been a whole year. You've joined us for these events. We'd really like to talk about board service. And she said, I'm ready for that question. I've been ready for that question. But it doesn't, you very rarely get the opportunity to invite someone in that hasn't experienced something that you're doing, what your priorities are. In our case, we're a small theater company. So having them see the work and meet some of the artists that make that work and meet the board members who are invested in that work is really often the trigger for them to say, I would also like to participate in this way. And on that note, I do have to step off.
Michael, thank you so much for taking the time.
My
Really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Good luck, everyone.
All right, let's go back to the prepared section of our. So Michael covered a bunch of stuff, some of which is implicit in the sort of more formal part of this presentation. So I will try not to repeat too much. We're just going to talk a little bit about board development and how you include diversity and diversifying your board in that process. And he mentioned a gap analysis. I'm going to give you some tools for that, and then maybe a few other ideas about where to find diverse board members and how to keep them, right? So he very much talked about board development as a process, right? He talked about cultivating people, keeping a pipeline going, being intentional about who you're looking for. Remember that we want our board members to make our organization better. That's what we're hiring them for, as it were. So we want to be intentional and strategic about this process, if possible. So here's your board development cycle. So center there, what are your organizational needs and goals, right? Your board should be a reaction. Who you have on your board should help you achieve your needs and goals. Michael just talked about the fact that they had a lease, they have a theater. They had a lease that they needed to negotiate. They needed a board member who had real estate background. That's how they helped identify them. Your needs can change. If you're a grassroots organization and people are, a startup, people are working, are volunteering, they're really running the organization. Then as you get bigger and bigger, you need to transition to a governing board. Those are different needs. So where the points in this process is you start with assessing and planning. Michael just talked about that. We'll do a little bit more. Recruiting and nominating. You want to make sure that you orient and train people, engage them meaningfully, and build their leadership skills. So it's a year-round process, and we really recommend that you form a committee that is dedicated to the care of your board generally, to all of those things, to thinking about who do we need, how do we recruit them, how do we engage them, how are they doing, right? How is our succession planning going? Really not having it be sort of ad hoc or the role of one or two people working out of their memory or their heads, but really being planful about the way you engage in this process, right? So you think about your board development goals. He said it can take years, indeed it can, but thinking about, again, the real estate, how old they are, those things. How is your overall board functioning? He just mentioned when someone said, how do the committees meet? He said they're on their own gloriously, right? Not every board has that success under its belt yet. So think about, are our committees functioning? Have a plan. If they're not, what are they doing wrong? That's a different webinar. But if you have committees, do they work, right? Do we regularly think about what are our expectations of our board members? Are they reasonable? What are their qualifications? Michael mentioned that the give-get, they have a give-get and it was too high for them to be able to add younger people and artists to their board, and yet they had identified those as things that they needed. So thinking through it and being flexible about what your qualifications are. Making sure that you assess your board members who are on your board, right? We don't want dead wood. We don't want people who don't want to show up, right? Again, planning for succession, thinking about your board positions, right? And thinking about how you bring people into the organization and ensure that they're happy and that they stay. So we start with assessing our officers and our board members. Again, we need clear goals. Make sure their bylaws or policies are not obstacles, right? We want to make sure that this is kind of a confidential process, right? Like he said, he asked his board members to self-identify themselves in terms of their ethnicity, their career, etc. You want to handle that kind of thing sensitively, not necessarily want to hand a list to everybody, but just report in the aggregate, right? Try not to make it personality based. Do think about, do we need consensus builders? Do we need leaders? That sort of thing. And then think again about skills, knowledge, diversity, who could be a potential leader in the future. It really helps to have a board job description when you go into this process. So as you're recruiting, right, we've got to the assessment part, we'll go into that a little bit more. Make sure that you are being clear about your expectations. Definitely the financial part, you don't want any surprises. We tend to minimize how much time we want from people. It's just a couple of meetings a year. It's not a big deal, right? When we're really looking for board members, you want to be transparent about that. Make sure that you're all on the same page when you go out and recruit board members. And you want to make sure that your current board is also doing what you want your future board members to do, right? No grandfathering in, you can grandfather in people who've been on for a while, but you don't want to create a two-tiered board, right? The new people that we're asking more of than the current people that we're not asking much of. That is a recipe for failure, as you can imagine. Make sure that you have a good, solid nominating process when you go into this. Time frame, just think about, okay, someone has identified this as a potential new board member. Do you know who they're going to talk to next? Is there a process? Do you want them to fill out an application? Do you hand them to the CEO? Do you hand them to the chair of the nominating committee? What kind of expectations do you have during this process? Obviously, for those of you who are arts organizations, you're going to want to make sure that any prospective board members, appreciate your art. But you also want any prospective board members to really know something about your programs and know something about your organization and know something about the culture of your board as well. So what do we mean when we think about diversity? Because where you start in this assessment process is thinking about what is diversity for your organization, right? We tend to think about these sort of top line things. Obviously, appearance, age, gender, ethnicity, physical ability, etc. These are all really great things to think about when you're diversifying your board, but there's a multitude of other things, other characteristics that might make your board better or more informed or help you make better decisions if they were represented, right? So I've mentioned, I think, a couple times now, if you actually have a physical facility, perhaps you would like to, perhaps it would be, good to have a voice in the room of someone who has a physical disability, who can't necessarily negotiate stairs or, that sort of thing. If you're working with veterans, military background, again, age, all of that, this kind of diversity as well. Then you want to create a board diversity plan. And he mentioned that, like write down, what do we need? And I'm going to show you a matrix here in a second, but what are the skills we need? How can we understand how people can meaningfully contribute to the organization, right? Identify roles and opportunities for future leadership, et cetera. I was just reading, and we cannot say this enough, I was just listening to a webinar yesterday about gentleman of color was talking about how disheartening it is to join a board and find out that they, even though they said they appreciated his professional expertise, et cetera, what they really wanted was his face in the room. And that is, it's not good for your board, it's not good for your organization, for your reputation. And you don't want to put a lot of effort into recruiting someone who will have not have a great opportunity. So you just want to think that through ahead of time. And again, what are the barriers? Lack of childcare, what is the financial contribution, time of day of meeting? Think about, if you're thinking about, well, we serve unhoused people and we want someone who's recently been unhoused on our board to bring their board perspective. Well, childcare might be an issue, or hours they can't really get, they're just starting in their job, they can't really get up from their desk and go join a board meeting. These are the things that it is useful to think through. So then, as we think about that gap analysis that Michael was talking about, here's one example of something pretty basic that you could use. This is what we call a board matrix, right? So these various areas, do we have it? Do we need it? Is it really a critical need? And then thinking about what is the strategy to reach those people. Here is a slightly more complicated tool that our friend David Ringwood from Nikon, who's on this call, uses all the time. Again, assessing high, medium, low, what do you have? Where are the gaps? And how can you think about a plan to find those people? I think it's important also to think about it in terms of priorities, to think about maybe your top 3 priorities. So, well, we need a lawyer, a banker, et cetera. Well, you mentioned real estate. Why do you need a lawyer? For what purpose? You just don't want, you want to think about how are they going to impact the work of your board. All right. So once you find these diverse members, they've gone through your nominating process, you want to keep them on your board. You want to keep them engaged, right? So it means building relationships with them, being open to sharing power, avoiding cliques, welcoming them, right? Sometimes joining a board can feel like, you're walking into a country club, right? So people who've been in that club forever know everything about it. They know where the tennis courts are, et cetera. People who have been in a country club before, they don't know exactly, but they have an idea. But people who've never been in one are lost. And sometimes we expect people who join our board to somehow figure out stuff on their own, right? What does it mean to come to a meeting? Should they read the minutes? How do they join the committee? How do they contribute? We expect them to figure it out on their own, but that is very difficult for people who've maybe never been on a board before. And when you're talking about people in, disadvantaged or communities, or younger people, people who have never been on a board before, you need to be really planful about making sure they feel welcome, making sure they know what their place is, where their place is, and making sure that they are asked that you empower them to have equal voices with everybody else in the room, including those people who have been there for a long time, or people who have been on a board before and sort of know what they're doing. Right, I'll answer that in a minute. Okay, so how do you do that? Well, you create an orientation process. And we really recommend that you have a physical live orientation for your new board members. We recommend that you invite your current board members too, right? So they can welcome your new board members. If you can do it as a class, if you can bring on 2 or 3 people at once, that's really great. You should have a board manual, obviously, that has things like minutes and finances, et cetera. But ensuring that it can also be a pretty good refresher for your current board members. Do all of your board members, do your board members who've been on for 10, 20 years know what you do now? Really understand the current state of your program. So bringing all of these people to your orientation can not only help your new board members feel really welcome, but can be a good little refresher course, right? Think about making sure that people meet key staff. Think about having a board mentor or buddy program. Someone who calls, the new board member when they miss a meeting or after the meeting and say, gosh, what did you think? And then pre-board service as well. If you have the luxury of being able to spend some time, you can elect board members several months before their terms so they can visit a board meeting and really get to know people. You can also use your committees to engage potential new board members so that you can, engage potential new board members, you can get to know them, they can get to know you, maybe they're not ready to make a full commitment yet. I am looking at my watch. Okay, we're about ready to have questions. So where do you find these people? Think about beyond your current networks. Think about community organizations, chambers of commerce, local associations of lawyers or CPAs, et cetera. Think about, if you haven't already, your volunteers. Maybe they can help identify potential leaders. I think that if we think stereotypically about board members, about how we reach them, about how we should reach them, then we're excluding people that might be in our networks. Our volunteers, our staff know people, make sure they know what you're looking for. Michael mentioned, half of his staff is people of color. Well, surely they might know people who would be interested in the organization. And certainly staff should be among your biggest advocates, right? Think about your client community. Think about your client community. I mentioned staff, board strong, and then think about conferences, events to attract diverse individuals. You could hold in your community, you could work with other nonprofits to hold a conference addressing a particular topic that's a challenge, for example, and really get out there to meet people, bring people into your organization you wouldn't necessarily meet in your day-to-day existence, right? We lead very siloed lives in this country and in the state of New York. So it's important for us to think about how do we step outside of those silos? Because if we rely only on the people that we know, we'll go back to that original slide that I had about the pitfalls of having a homogeneous board, having people who all look and think alike, and how that stifles creativity and growth. So that is the formal part of our presentation, and we have about 7 minutes left for questions. I see one in the chat now. Is there a cost for organizations using BoardStrong to look for candidates? Yes and no. So you can register for free. You can create a profile for free. The way that we are funded is through regions. So if we have funding from your local foundation in your region, for example, if you're in the Hudson Valley, then there is no cost to look for candidates. If we don't have support from a local community foundation or a local foundation, then it's $25 a quarter. So really kind of modest, but helping us recoup our investment in the platform. But signing up, then you have to post a job description to actually look for people. But certainly, go create a profile, poke around a little bit. explore, take some time. Most welcome to do that. We really want people to sign up for it. We think it's a great tool. We have other questions? What do we got? We got 6 minutes left. I've answered everything. Okay. Let's see. Our board has turned over and we were working on greater diversity, but at the same time, we are looking for a local strategic planner. Does anyone have recommendations? Darcy McCourt. We do strategic planning too, or our Nikon, our affiliate organization, does strategic planning. So we'll write down your name and get back to you about that. Anything else? All right, well, we have 5 minutes left. So if you feel comfortable, perhaps put something in the chat. Is there anything that you learned today that you're going to go out and do tomorrow? Something that you hadn't thought of, or something that we've encouraged you to do or given you a little boost? Anything that you're going to use from this session after we're done here? Sign up on the board matching platform. Yay, Jessica, thank you. Doing a gap analysis, good. That's very great, Linda, that's critical. Training for an orientation for new members is a great idea. Thank you, Paul. That's great. Yeah, thank you, Paul. Training orientation for new board members, especially, like I said, if you're going to recruit people who've never been on a board before, or maybe don't come from communities where we think about people being board members, and it'll help improve your current board or help your current board as well. Training, engagement, et cetera. That's one of the things that keeps people engaged in your organization. You know, when we think about board members, we think about what we want from them. You know, we want their opinion, we want their leadership. Doesn't hurt to think a little bit about what they want from us, which is a meaningful experience of feeling like they really impact a cause that they care about. But also some leadership experience, leadership training and experience that they might not otherwise get, meeting some interesting people that they might not otherwise know, making sure that they have an experience that's rewarding will keep them on your board, coming to board meetings and enjoying being a part of your organization. What else we got here? All right. Oh, okay. So some ones that I think they looked for lower income board candidates, it sounds like a great idea, but you're unlikely to find someone. I think that really depends on, I think that I mean, I'm on a board where we have someone where it's a board that deals with people who've been impacted by the opioid epidemic. And we have someone who has been in the past, as one of our clients in the past. It's really, I think, first off, making sure that you don't, you're not, again, creating a two-tiered or a check the box or, something that makes that person feel like they stand out and are uncomfortable. And secondly, really understanding and being able to communicate why you want them. I think that if we look at underserved communities, people are just as, there are many people who are civically engaged and engaged in what is offered in their community, what benefits their community. I mean, even we know that, communities that have art, for example, theater, et cetera, are more successful in having people feel like they're cohesive in a neighborhood. So it's a matter of figuring out how to find those people, maybe your local community board, or asking your local elected officials, are there people who are particularly active in their neighborhoods who might be interested and really understand the issues that impact the people that you serve. Making sure that you know what you want them for and what value they can bring, and making sure that they appreciate that. How does organization address structural barriers to joining a board when some folks need 3 jobs to make ends meet? Yeah, that's not easy. Having work, even people who have 1 job to make things meet, timing can be difficult. I think that you need to be flexible, and maybe, you know, if again, it's thinking through if those are the people that you want to bring onto your board, if you really feel like they will, and I think that you absolutely could think, okay, we're serving this population and so many of them are so stretched and they don't have enough time, etc. Maybe you don't ask them to join your board, maybe you ask them to join an advisory committee if they feel really too overwhelmed to be that part of your organization. You can always create different kinds of structures and advisory committees as well. All right, and with that, my watch says it's 1 o'clock exactly. So we've kept you for an hour, we've kept this to an hour. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. And you'll get this presentation and the slides tomorrow. And we hope to see you at our next event. We're taking a couple months off, but you'll get an invitation for our next workshop in September. So enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your summer.
Bye for now.